Hi everybody, it's Mrs. Heath. I'm coming to you from our classroom. I happen to be sitting in front of our whiteboard right now. It is the end of the school year. I have finished cleaning up our classroom. We are ready to close it up for the summer. And to commemorate that, I have a fun little project that we're going to do. When I come to see you at your house, I plan on giving you something special that's going to relate to the read aloud that I'm about to do with you. This read aloud is a chapter book, and it is called Flat Stanley. It is not something that we've done in our classroom, reading a chapter book. Chapter books usually have lots of pages, and if you'll see, this one's kind of thick, and it has lots of pages. They don't always have pictures, but this one happens to have pictures. This is called Flat Stanley, His Original Adventure. And the author is Jeff Brown, and I believe he also did the pictures. So this is Flat Stanley, His Original Adventure. Oh, I see. It was by Jeff Brown. The pictures are by Mackie Pamintuan. I don't know if I said that correctly. Each page does have a picture, but it also has lots of words. So I'm going to read each chapter individually. Here's our contents list, our table of contents. As you can see, it has 5 chapters. So each one will be a different read aloud. So this is going to be the first read aloud for the first chapter, and then I will do 4 more after that to complete it. The first chapter is called The Big Bulletin Board. The second chapter is called Being Flat. The third chapter is called Stanley and the Kite. Chapter 4 is The Museum Thieves. And chapter 5 is Arthur's Good Idea. So we are going to start with chapter 1. Flat Stanley, His Original Adventure. Chapter 1, The Big Bulletin Board. Breakfast was ready. I will go wake up the boys, Mrs. Lambchop said to her husband, George Lambchop. Just then their younger son, Arthur, called from the bedroom he shared with his brother Stanley. Hey, come look, hey! Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop were both very much in favor of politeness and careful speech. Hay is for horses, Arthur, not people, said Mr. Lambchop as he entered the bedroom. Try to remember that. Excuse me, said Arthur, but look! He pointed to Stanley's bed. Across it lay an enormous bulletin board that Mr. Lambchop had given the boys a Christmas ago so they could pin up pictures and messages and maps. It had fallen during the night on top of Stanley. But Stanley was not hurt. In fact, he would still have been sleeping if he had not been woken up by his brother's shout. What's going on here? He called out cheerfully from beneath the enormous board. Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop hurried to lift it off the bed. Heavens, said Mrs. Lambchop. Gosh, said Arthur, Stanley's flat. Uh-oh. He kind of got squished flat. As a pancake, said Mr. Lambchop. Darndest thing I've ever seen. Let's all have breakfast, Mrs. Lambchop said. Then Stanley and I will go see Dr. Dan and hear what he has to say. In his office, Dr. Dan examined Stanley all over. How do you feel? He asked. Does it hurt very much? I felt sort of tickly for a while after I got up, Stanley Lambchop said, but I feel fine now. Well, that's mostly how it is with these cases, said Dr. Dan. We'll just have to keep an eye, there he is looking at him, on this young fellow. He said then he had finished with his examination. Sometimes we doctors, despite all our years of training and experience, can only marvel at how little we really know. So the doctor thinks he's okay being flat. Mrs. Lambchop said she thought Stanley's clothes would have to be altered by the tailor now. A tailor is someone who can sew clothes. So Dr. Dan told his nurse to take Stanley's measurements. Mrs. Lambchop wrote them down. Stanley was 4 feet tall, about a foot wide, and a half an inch thick, which is only about that much. That's about how thick he was. That's not much. So I should show you this picture. That's him getting his measurements. And then we're on to chapter 2. Follow my next read aloud to read chapter 2 with me, Being Flat.